Greetings, this is Chris Ruby, the Nostalgic Catholic, with yet another installment of the Isaac Asimov short stories. And as you can see, this cover does not feature an Asimov story on the cover, but it is there, nevertheless, in the table of contents under the title, third one there, The Red Queen's Race by Isaac Asimov. So there we are, Red Queen's Race. And once again, this is not a Foundation story, this is not a robot story, it's a standalone. So, or almost entirely. There's an odd reference we'll get to briefly. I don't think it's a real tie-in, though. I think it's just the use of a word that has seen uses elsewhere and just kind of bubbles forth at this one point. We'll get to that. Okay, so once again, it's on page 65, and this one, like the other, no connection is, because it's not tied in with Foundations or robots or otherwise connected into like an Asimov mystery or an Asimov, one of those great novels like Nightfall or something. It's gathered up into the early Asimov. So, that done and said, the early Asimov wanted to bring us as close to these things as possible. As far as I can see, he doesn't seem to have done anything to the text, unless maybe just the occasional very small typo that doesn't mean diddly. So, what we've got then is a story. This one's kind of like a time, not travel per se, but it starts with this professor who was kind of a scientist, a little bit wild with some crazy ideas and some interesting things he wanted to accomplish. And he seemed to have this idea that, the ancient Greeks had all this grand cultural advancement, despite still having slavery and so forth. But they didn't have the technological wherewithal to make it work. In fact, actually, the slavery would be probably one of the principal reasons why. You have slaves, you have an underclass, they don't like it, they're going to try to undermine the whole social order. I mean, of course they want to, so they can get freed. That's the only thing they could say in favor of that to slavery, as in more recent times, is that you were enslaved because you got yourself into debt, or sometimes because of fortunes of war kind of thing, and not because of where you were born or who you were born from or what color your skin was. Okay, well, all right, gee, that makes it really enlightened slavery, right? Well, slavery is slavery. Indentured servitude, it should be that you work off the debt. That's everyone with a debt to pay is in effect a slave, by the way. Except we go where we want and do what we pretty much want to do. Except we better maintain a viable living that not only allows us to take care of our own immediate needs and any, family, etc. needs, but also have something extra to pay off the debt with. And we have to somehow keep that going, come what may. We're not free to just not pay a debt. But at any rate, apparently without technology to basically make machines to be the servants of humanity, it depended, too much of what they had going for them depended on the slaves, and so all the great enlightened ideas of the ancient Greeks also collapsed in their own wake. So what if more scientific and technological knowledge were to be injected back in those times? So that basically is what this professor, let's see, that's his name in here, Elmer Tywood, Ph.D, Sc.D, sociology, philosophy doctor, sociology doctor, fellow of This and Honorary That, one-time youthful participant of the original Manhattan Project, and now full professor of nuclear physics. So he's got some serious letters after his name, and apparently rather earned. But he gets found dead in the nuclear reactor where a tremendous amount of plutonium appears to have been discharged all at once, No explosion, no big radiation leaks or anything like that. The energy was somehow captured, utilized, and sent somewhere. Then you get into a little bit of a discussion about matter, energy conversion, and so forth. It takes all this energy to make much matter. And basically, if you wanted to send about how many pounds of dirt to the past, you would basically gobble up all the known plutonium in the Earth and effectively end nuclear power for the foreseeable future. But he's not sending pounds and pounds of dirt. He's sending just a little tiny document or some piece of paper or a few pieces of paper, which he has. It turns out later on we meet a friend of his, or I don't know, somebody else in the university who is a philosopher's doctor of philosophy itself, and also learned in the ancient Greek language. A guy who could basically read Plato as easily as we read a contemporary book, and also write in the way that Plato would have written stuff. Effectively that would have fit right in. And he is basically hired by our Professor Tywood to take some scientific and technological texts and translate them into the Greek of that period, so that Tywood will basically burn up a huge amount of nuclear energy to send this document with Greek stuff into the past and give the Greeks what that could have changed everything. He has some artwork. In fact, we start off, all right, we have this rather odd-looking person. Maybe that's the Professor Tywood. This is the scroll that he's got all this Greek. And question mark is what they filed supposedly in the story. They filed this whole thing under in all the secret records of classified records of America's government or something. They filed this all the way under question mark. Like, what the heck is this? We don't really know. We have no idea what to make of it. But it's secret, and we're not letting this thing out. So apparently they've done a great job of keeping it secret. So the question mark is also part of the story. There's a little blurb that comes with this. Obviously, this is one thing you wouldn't get from the early Asimov. It just reads, "If you can remember your Alice, you'll remember the Red Queen had a fair understanding of the principle of relativity." Okay. Actually, it's surprising how, in other words, it's the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland. It's surprising how very little that character puts in an appearance in any way, shape, or form. Pretty much just a little bit at the conclusion. You have a place where we have our main guy kind of trying to investigate what's going on. He's got one piece of this Greek paper that apparently, for some reason, some sheets of this Greek stuff translated did not get sent back. I don't know. Maybe a bunch of them were prepared. Maybe some of them were deemed not worth sending, and very careful decisions. Okay, I've got 20 here. I think I can send 3 of them or something. Let's pick the 3 that are most crucial or something like that, and the rest were just sitting in safe somewhere. That's the only reason there's anything left. Anyway, one of those sheets is shown, I think, to the Greek translator. You can see he's understandably surprised at what he's seeing. I remember comparing this. Let me tell you a little about it. So he's actually the one who knew the most. Second to that, to know a lot, would have been one of the graduate students working under Professor Tywood. Apparently, of the 4, one of them was actually kind of doing some experiments with some sort of, it amounted to a kind of time travel. It was very infinitesimal, very small, and you're just sending a tiny amount of matter back a few seconds and watching. It's like now it's in 2 places at once for a few seconds, so the radiation doubles, and then it falls off when you get to where the point would have been sent back from. So I send it back. I'm doing a recording of the levels of radiation in this thing. Then there's this increase as it just almost doubles or increases significantly, and the radioactivity is going there double for a while until I do this experiment that sends it back in time. And once I get to that moment, the doubling stops, and we're just left with the original matter that is now, at the radioactive level. It's the matter has been shifted back 15 minutes or however long in time, and you could actually show that you could do this. Makes it sound very scientific. I mean, this is actually very much. It makes it sound as almost believable and scientific as. There's another thing we'll get to. I've skipped it, and I'm going to skip it until we get much later on for reasons that'll have to become clear later. Something called theotemoline, which again is written up so scientifically sounding that you get the idea that this powdery substance will literally dissolve in water even before the water has been introduced. It knows the future, in effect. So, at any rate, so the one graduate student has some information about what the professor's doing from a standpoint, but he's not included in all of it, but he can provide some helpful hints. The Greek translator, of course, is much more important. And I guess our investigator reports to someone called the boss. I assume his boss. I don't know. It could be Tywood's boss. I don't know. Just a boss. And there's another drawing. I guess that's supposed to be a boss. For some reason, the boss has these cigars that he likes to kind of light up at very special occasions when he kind of wants a little time to think, so he has time to think before he replies. So he'll slowly, tediously take. He doesn't smoke otherwise. He'll take out a cigar and very painstakingly trim off the end and light it and, suck on it deeply and hold on to it. All this time using time to think of what he's going to say. So, that's what he's thinking about all these ancient Greeks, which I guess are why we have sort of Greek-looking figures behind the boss. So, those are our drawings associated with this story. And the fear is this. We've sent modern scientific knowledge back to ancient Greece. And what if that changes things? That's the idea. What if a perfect civilization just emerges out of that, and so much of history we know doesn't have it happen? Somehow they get the idea that after about 20 days, the changes made way back then will catch up with now, and everything will be all different. We will all likely cease to exist, and what will be there instead will be basically like an alternate reality or a parallel reality, or whatever you want to call it. And the Greek translator, he seems to have more scientific wisdom than the scientist here, Tywood, because he's realizing science doesn't work that way. You can't just give somebody something and they'll know what it is or what to do with it. Everything in science has to come at its time, when people are ready for it. And there's a couple of great quotes here where he's discussing this, and I really like this. Really describes it so well, and it's basically what this is about. So, okay. Do you think you can graft the developments of 2,000 years of slow labor onto a child society not ready for it? Do you think a great invention or a great scientific principle is born full grown in the mind of a genius divorced from his cultural milieu? Newton's enunciation of the law of gravity was delayed for 20 years because the then current figure for the Earth's diameter was wrong by 10%. Archimedes almost discovered calculus, but failed because Arabic numerals, which were invented by some nameless Hindu or group of Hindus, were unknown to him. I guess he had to try to use Roman numerals or whatever equivalent to that the Greeks would have had, which, they don't have a zero for one thing. They don't have any meaningful way to handle fractions. To say nothing of irrational numbers. Multiplication is horrible. Division, just imagine trying to do long division with Roman numerals. It's, just translate it into Arabic and do it the normal way we got taught in school, and then you can translate the answer back to it would make a lot more sense. Trying to do it all in Roman numerals or anything equivalently primitive is unthinkable. So, no calculus from Archimedes. Okay, and then he even brings in a little business about the slave society. For that matter, the mere existence of a slave society in ancient Greece and Rome meant that machines could scarcely attract much attention, slaves being so much cheaper and more adaptable, and men of true intellect could scarcely be expected to spend their energies on devices intended for manual labor. Even Archimedes, the greatest engineer of antiquity, refused to publish any of his practical inventions, only mathematical abstractions, and when a young man asked Plato of what use geometry was, he was forthwith expelled from the academy as a man with a mean, unphilosophic soul. Science does not plunge forward, it inches along in the directions permitted by the greater forces that mold society and which are in turn molded by society, and no great man advances but on the shoulders of the society that surrounds him. So, and that's really true. There just comes a point. Imagine trying to explain the periodic table to a culture for whom the known elements are earth and air, fire and water. Where does gold fit in? Well, it's kind of a mixture of, one or two of these things is just right. Well, okay, make some gold that way, huh? Can't do that. Well, lead is heavy, gold is heavy, maybe we could turn one or the other. You never seem to find a way to do that. You can make gold that'll turn itself into lead, I suppose, if you really know enough nuclear, science and so forth. But even that is just inconceivable. The idea of a substance that just gradually destroys itself and turning into something else, uranium into lead or any of the other, radioactive elements, unknown, unheard of. So, how are you going to explain all that? You can't. There's no common frame of reference. So, in other words, how much would it really have done? Now, I saw there's a question on Quora, which I actually provided one of many answers to. What do you think would be very influential if it got sent back in time? And I guess they said, well, suppose you send this or that kind of artifact, say a car or something. Yeah, and they'd get back there and they wouldn't know how to work the thing. They wouldn't know that it needs to be fueled, let alone what to fuel it or how to obtain the fuel for it. Oh, we'll send some fuel with it or it's gassed up. Okay, so let's say you even get it to work for a while, and then it stops working. Why doesn't it work anymore? They won't have a clue. It'd just be this weird, mysterious thing. They don't understand. I suggested if you really want to muck things up, send the number 355 divided by 113. Just that number as a ratio. Because that number is so incredibly close to pi that by any normal measurement, even by a circle the size of planet Earth, you'd have been within 10 feet of what the answer of pi would give you. It's that close. They would have probably thought this is the ratio of the diameter to the circumference of a circle, this fraction, and who knows how much of mathematics would not have been invented because of that one thing. You had the answer, or at least something looked so darn close to it. Everyone knew 22/7, which is what they did use in ancient times, was an approximation and clearly not a very good one. So, but if you had this other fraction, you can just imagine all the mystical things people would make of it. So, it just goes to show the most you could do might be to screw things up by something like that, if anything. But as it turns out, the Greek translator just sent back the kinds of stuff that were already there. And, the Greeks do have a few interesting things they've done and built or calculated, and so forth. You have a couple of guys talking about atoms for no clear reason. Well, maybe this is why they're talking about it. So, yeah, it's been a fun little story, and on the whole, again, it's kind of nice. It's kind of refreshing to get a story that does not have robots in it. Oh, if there was one, a weird reference. I mentioned it really briefly. Let's see, page 80. This would be 84. If you're trying to change the present or the past or whatever by such a thing, okay. Continuing a little more of this speech of our Greek translators, a little bit more. It was difficult for me to jump to the obvious conclusion, since the achievements of modern science transcend the imaginings of philosophy in so many ways. But I learned the truth eventually, and it was at once obvious that Tywood's theory of changing history was infantile. There are 20 million variables for every instant of time, and no system of mathematics, no mathematical psychohistory, to coin a phrase, has yet been developed to handle that ocean of varying functions. So, a psychohistory, foundation type of reference. But this is not to imply that one day some clever man named Harvey Self is going to invent psychohistory for real. There's no implication of that as far as I'm concerned. Even that reference does not make this in any way, shape, or form a foundation story. But it is kind of odd to see that cute little tie-in with the Foundation series, Psychohistory. Okay, well, that's enough of that. So, thanks for listening.